Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Legislative Energy Commission, our meeting here on November 13th, 2023 at 1:30. We're at room 120 of the Capitol. I note a quorum is present. Thank you all for making time. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the September 22nd meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? Like Senator Rarick or perhaps Representative Stevenson?
Well, who are you calling on, Mr. Chair?
I'm calling on you, Representative Stevenson.
So I'll move the
buckle
minutes.
up. So moved. Any second? All right. Representative Kraft, I know you'll second that.
I will second that.
Any discussion? All right, hearing that, all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, minutes are approved. We are going to go to Co-Chair Acom now on the discussion of the rules. You may remember the LCC's guidance on this. A quorum is present. Representative Acom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. After the discussion that we had last time in the LEC about the rotation time, I think what I'm going to suggest is that we have a 60-day rotation period, and if there isn't a meeting prior to that, that the gavel change. And if there is an agreement between the chairs about a meeting between that, that can be fine. So that's my motion.
All right. Representative Acom moves that essentially the rule be either a new meeting is held where the gavel changes hands or 60 days elapses, whichever is sooner. For the record, I'm in favor of such a rule. Any discussion, members, for or against the proposal by Representative Acom? All right, hearing none, all in favor of the motion to make that our rules for the LEC signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, 60-day rule is adopted. Members, if you have your agenda, we have two items, hydrogen and the possibilities for hydrogen first, estimating about 45 minutes for that, and then community solar garden second. With that, we are going to turn to the witnesses on hydrogen first, if I'm understanding. And according to our agenda, that would be Dr. Eric Gimone. Dr. Gimone, are you here either in person or online?
I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, if you could speak up just a little bit.
Okay, crank up my game. Yeah, thank you. Well, hello, co-chairs and members. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. You guys look like a lovely bunch, and I know you just had lunch, so I'll try to be short and sweet. So my name is Dr. Eric Gimon. I work as a senior fellow with Energy Innovation, where I focus mostly on how to reach a fully decarbonized power grid. Energy Innovation is a San Francisco-based think tank that works with lead policymakers, such as yourselves, to achieve ambitious climate mitigation goals. So these days, I'm very focused on the intersection of the power grid with cleaning up industry. So I'm looking at the opportunities for synergy and the potential pitfalls of doing it wrong. So this meeting is of strong interest to me. So thank you for having me here and accommodating me with a Zoom connection. Okay, now let's talk hydrogen. So I think of Minnesota as a nice state, but also a savvy state, right? Like savvy farmer, they should be capitalizing on the opportunities of hydrogen and also not indulging in magical thinking. This means examining the pros and cons of various approaches and policies very carefully. So let me paint a picture for you, a picture of a prosperous Minnesota in 2040 with 100% clean electricity. But in this vision, the state has cleaned up a lot of its transportation sector, its building sector, its industrial heat, and it's mostly doing that with electrification because that's the most efficient way, but it's also using some amount of clean hydrogen. And to do all that, it needs a bigger grid and more generation and a rich set of new local clean resources, especially your excellent wind resources. And also, you might not think of this as something that applies to Minnesota, but also you have pretty good solar resources that are a good match to complement the wind. And because you've got these clean resources, you offer a lot of enticing opportunities. So you can look beyond just cleaning up the state and think about opportunities to do exports and to keep money in the state, basically driving economic growth. Let me give you two examples, okay? The first example is Minnesota as a state currently, as far as I can tell, imports all its ammonia-based fertilizer, but it could be making a lot of it itself. Second example for you, Minnesota produces 75% of the produced in iron ore in the US. What if you, instead of shipping all that out, kept about half of it to make clean steel with hydrogen right here in the state? Now, let's look at some numbers. So a quick look at our energy innovation policy simulator for Minnesota, which I recommend you guys look at, policy.solutions, shows that you guys would have about 80 terawatt hours of annual electricity consumption by 2040 under a business as usual. Now, if you add a suite of progressive policies to clean up transportation of buildings, industrial heat, and electric cars, things like that, then you can imagine something like another 60 terawatt hours on top of those 8 by 2040. And what if you were pursuing these opportunities I was talking about? Suppose you were making all the ammonia that you needed for Minnesota, right? Not even talking about exporting it. And you upscaled maybe half of the iron that you had here. So 20 metric tons of iron going into green steel via direct reduction with hydrogen. All that would be an extra 80 terawatt hours of new electricity, right? So better policies, more hydrogen, you're basically tripling your demand. And a big part of that would be the hydrogen. So just keep in mind, hydrogen production is big time stuff. Now, what does this mean? Right? Well, this leaves Minnesota at a crossroad. So down one path, you're basically tripling your clean generation fleet, but you have good cross-sectoral planning. You provide incentives for coordination, and all that new industrial load is operating flexibly in a way that delivers cheap and reliable electricity for the current and future end uses while stimulating the economy. For example, in this first path, imagine giant electrolyzer loads that can ramp up and down in coordination with the rest of the grid. So when you have the least valuable electricity, that is when there's a big surplus, not necessarily surplus, but there's plenty of wind and solar, then you're running these machines. And you're backing them off when the electricity supply is tighter, right? Sometimes you're backing off some of this stuff because you just don't use it, or you can, if it's like industrial heat and things like that, you can use alternative fuels during those periods. Now, in the other path of this crossroads, my policy as usual, what you're looking at is huge new loads that are going to strain the grid. That's going to create reliability problems. It's going to increase costs. Okay, and when that happens, your decarbonization. Sorry, those words can get heavy sometimes. That your targets are delayed, right? And even worse, I think for Minnesota, you're missing out on these opportunities for economic growth. You know, when I look all across the country of where you would really want to make hydrogen, where it's sensible to make hydrogen, the top place that lights up is Minnesota. Okay, but if the power becomes expensive and hard to get, then that's not going to happen. So to reach your future climate and economic goals in 2040, Minnesota's going to have to make a big leap forward, and it's going to have to stick the landing. So what does that mean for you guys in the legislative branch? Well, first and foremost, you need to educate yourselves about these possible future paths for the state energy system. We're talking about something that looks fairly different than what we have today, right? And then think about your role in this. You know, a lot of these agencies like the Public Utilities Commissions and so on are going to be a bit siloed. And you guys can help promote these cross-sectoral planning and operations. You could also be funding pilots that de-risk new kinds of industrial activity that promote your vision, right? And new kinds, I mean, not just like somebody starts using electricity for a new thing, but it uses it in a new way, in a flexible way. So, and to do this, my advice for you all is to find common ground on broad principles that will guide your policy development. For example, you should think about steering hydrogen use towards its best and most efficient uses, right? Hydrogen is not a great way to carry electricity. Like if you take electricity, hydrogen back to electricity, you maybe get 25, 30% back, okay? So it can be a wasteful way to use your raw electricity. You really need to think about where it goes in the most useful way, because you've got a big generation budget ahead of you. You're going to have to triple the size of your fleet potentially. Now, what does this mean for these hydrogen hubs, right? So the Heartland Hydrogen Hub has 3 parts, and Excel is involved with 2 of them, right? So let's think about these 2. The South Dakota node is going to be breaking new ground and producing fertilizer closer to home. That's one of the opportunities I talked to you about. The other node, the clean energy node, is going to allow the utility to explore and better understand the future of hydrogen. You'll be hearing more from Excel. I'll be interested to see what their plans are. It still feels a bit vague to me. But part of that is you got to remember these things aren't finalized yet. And if you look at the project timelines, it's going to take 10 years at least to come to fruition. And what does that 10-year time frame mean? It means you can't wait for these hubs to be done to start doing stuff. You got to be moving now. You got to start your journey now and pick your path wisely. Thank you for listening to me, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Doctor. Members, any questions? Let's try to take the questions at the end of the witness. So any questions for this witness, says the judge? All right. Thank you, Doctor. Hope you can continue to join us. Next on the agenda, we have Xcel Energy first. Mike Jensen, Director of Clean Fuels. Mr. Jensen. And then also, is it Ms. Valdez?
Valdez. Yes.
Valdez, Ms. Valdez. Welcome to the Legislative Energy Commission. Mr. Jensen, assuming that you want to go first, that's how we've got it listed here. Just please identify yourself and fire away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, and members. Very pleased to be here. Thank you for having us. Again, my name is Mike Jensen, Director of Projects and Clean Fuels with Xcel Energy.
And I'm joining Mike. I'm Catherine Valdez, Area Vice President, Corporate Planning and Carbon-Free Technology Development. And we do have a few slides we hope to step through today. Mike will cover the first 2/3 and I'll finish it if that works.
Yeah, works fine. Nick, are we all set for that? I think him standing up is a sign we need just 1 second.
Perfect.
Well, I can kind of start a little bit here as we get going. Just want to thank you very much for having us, and really excited to talk about the Heartland Hydrogen Hub and Xcel's participation in the hub. I know it was in the printout out front, those slides.
Members, it should be in your packets, but I'm assuming you'd like to display them online?
I can just
Maybe
go
not.
with it too as well.
Go.
All right. Well, looking at those slides, going from the top right, shows Xcel Energy's 2050 goals. I'm sure many of you have seen this before already. Xcel was one of the first in the nation to announce a 100% carbon-free goal for our electric system by 2050, net zero, 100% net zero in our gas system by 2050, as well as supporting the decarbonization of the transportation system as well. That relates back into the Heartland Hydrogen Hub, but we see hydrogen as playing a very important role in those efforts, especially getting from our 2030 80% goals into that 2050 space. As the first speaker mentioned, there's a lot of different uses for hydrogen, and the Hydrogen Hub, I think, does a good job of touching on each of those, as well as investigating how best to use it later on. The next slide in there, talking about hydrogen strategy, really lays some of that out in further detail, going across the supply chain of production to transportation to end use of hydrogen. One thing to note there, and at the top where it sees little bottles, if you don't have a color copy, you'll notice that, or if you had a color copy, you'd see those bottles are different colors. In the hydrogen space, there's a color wheel of hydrogen, green and blue and gray and such. I'm going to assume that not everyone has that color wheel on their office at work, the way I do. But there's only a couple that are really important to know about. Gray hydrogen is hydrogen that's produced today. Traditionally, hydrogen is produced using natural gas, which has a significant carbon footprint. Adding a carbon capture system onto that is when they designate it as blue hydrogen. The third node of the Heartland Hydrogen Hub, the Liberty node that Xcel Energy is not a part of, does include some of that blue hydrogen in North Dakota. But that's all that, not part of Xcel Energy's scope. Whereas then green hydrogen is going to be hydrogen produced with electrolysis and renewable energy. And then pink hydrogen, similar electrolysis-based hydrogen using nuclear technology. It's an important distinction and goes to the focus from Xcel is producing low to zero carbon hydrogen in all of the work that we are doing. Coming to the map, lower right-hand corner says OSED, the Office of, thank you. So these are the 7 selected hydrogen hubs across the U.S. A little background originally, so we've been working on this for over a year and a half. 79 concept papers were submitted across the nation. 3 of those were participated by Xcel Energy, all given green light from the DOE to give more information and submit full applications. That then brought it down to 26 full applications. And then ultimately those 7 selected ones, Heartland Hydrogen Hub being the one that we're talking about today. One thing to note is the little dots within the Heartland Hydrogen Hub circle. Those are denoting the nodes that we've mentioned again. The North Dakota node is the TC and Marathon partnered node. Then there's the South Dakota node. And then the one node in Minnesota is a little misleading. We don't have a single location of facilities for hydrogen production for our Minnesota node. It's really just representing that we're in Minnesota for that part of it. Next slide saying regional clean hydrogen hubs. Important thing to note here is the Department of Energy process, where they break down both the funding and progression of the hubs into phases 1 through 4. And that is also tied with the funding of the hydrogen hubs, meaning that as we go through negotiations with the DOE, we will agree to milestones and go, no-go decision points. And then at the end of each phase, we'll have a discussion with the Department of Energy, making sure everything is meeting those milestones. That's also a point where the Department of Energy could say progress isn't being made and therefore stop funding. And so that's a unique part of the hydrogen hubs, and the way the funding works is that phased nature, and it's not really a reapply, but it's an evaluation at the end of each phase to make sure where we're going towards with that. The next slide shows the award negotiation map. An important distinction when we talk about the Hydrogen Hub Award, it is a selection of award negotiation. They don't cut us a check right away. First we got to talk about it for a bit. We expect that negotiation process to take somewhere in the range of 6 to 12 months. In this graphic, we are on the downslope of that first from 1 to 2, where we have just begun our negotiations with the Department of Energy. And that negotiation is between Department of Energy and then the 3 main partners of the Heartland Hydrogen Hub. And then all the other hubs are doing the same process as we go through, going through environmental analysis, risk analysis, firming up the scope and the cost and the schedule of the project. The next slide showing a little bit of a map. These are just the partners of the Heartland Hydrogen Hub. The Energy and Environmental Research Center, EERC, out of the University of North Dakota. TC Energy and Marathon, who have come together making an LLC. In our application that was listed as the Liberty LLC, whereas today they are the Prairie Horizons Energy Solutions LLC. Again, that's in North Dakota, not part of Xcel Energy's scope. Our scope again is twofold: our wind to ammonia node and then our clean energy node. The wind to ammonia node has work happening in both North Dakota and Minnesota, whereas the clean energy node is focused primarily in Minnesota. Then the next slide with a little bit more of a zoom into Minnesota gets into those 2 nodes. The wind to ammonia node is just as it sounds. We will be using constrained wind, where we can locate electrolyzers directly next to a wind farm that is oftentimes constrained. And so when that wind farm is constrained and the price of wind energy is very low, we can add load, like the previous speaker mentioned, and make hydrogen, make it at a very low cost. Then with partnership with an ethanol producer in Minnesota, we offtake that hydrogen, sell it to them, and they would then convert that hydrogen into ammonia, then truck that ammonia from that same location to their ethanol plant, where they actively capture the carbon dioxide that is otherwise emitted or vented from their ethanol production, combining the hydrogen and, combining the ammonia and carbon dioxide, they can make agricultural fertilizer of urea. Could stop right there with the ammonia, but their farm communities in the area, the farm co-ops that they're talking with, would prefer to use that urea. It's a more shelf-stable, easier to use, and such like that. We see that one as a really exciting model that could be repeated over and over by Xcel Energy and by others of, again, using those constrained wind resources and following that progression, making that urea to make it a more local product. The majority of ammonia that's used in agricultural today and urea is made not in Minnesota. And then our clean energy node is really focused around using our current as well as ever expanding fleet of clean energy resources of wind, solar, and our nuclear plants to produce lots of hydrogen with a couple of focuses around the use of that hydrogen. First, for our own use in decarbonizing our electric generation fleet, where we can take that hydrogen, blend it with natural gas into a natural gas combustion turbine. And then secondly, potentially blending it into our gas distribution systems, again, blending that hydrogen with natural gas. And then third, into industrial offtake. There are lots of different uses in that industrial offtake. Xcel Energy is part of a sustainable aviation fuel hub, which is a partnership with Greater MSP, Delta Airlines, Cargill, and Ecolabs. Where that is a potential use for that hydrogen to make a sustainable aviation fuel, as well as we have some very large petroleum refineries in the state, in the area that also use a lot of hydrogen, use of green steel. So there's a laundry list of different ways that we could potentially offtake that hydrogen as we are ramping up into those larger levels of hydrogen production. Last slide I'll get to just before I hand it over to Catherine is a rough project schedule. As was mentioned, the hydrogen hubs span over 10 plus years. And so this is a long-term scale project. The hydrogen industry for outside of what it is today is still growing, still developing, figuring out who it's going to be. And so it's where the hydrogen hub is looking at a 10-year window of scale. It's going to take us time to be building and building up towards those later times. And the DOE process is built to support that. Again, starting with that phase 1, detailed planning, then getting into our detailed designs and constructions, and ultimately getting into operations in the late 28 through 2032 timeframes.
Oops. There we go. Thanks, Mike. So one important thing to note, and thank you for having me and my laryngitis join you today. Is this on?
Yeah, Ms. Valdez, if you don't mind just introducing yourself.
Oh, yeah, certainly. Apologies. This is Catherine Valdez, Area Vice President, Corporate Planning and Carbon-Free Technology Strategy. My team leads our pursuit of Department of Energy partnerships, along with the Clean Fuels Organization for the Hydrogen Hub, and then a few other awards that I'll wrap up our remarks with today. An important consideration with all of the new Department of Energy programs that were funded through the bipartisan infrastructure law was a very significant weighting and expectation around the community benefits plans. And that is really an entirely kind of new construct within the Department of Energy. It wasn't just an evaluation of your proposal based upon the technical merits, the technology you would deploy, and the economics of that solution, but where are you deploying it? How are you helping the communities through a clean energy transition where you serve? And how are you taking their input and developing the labor and workforce that you will need? So our hydrogen hub application had a very robust component with regards to community benefits. We believe it's one of the reasons that we were selected. We're developing it. It has to include advancements in your community and labor engagement, your workforce development, education, and training. Clean hydrogen is not a big economy anywhere in the United States, and definitely not in Minnesota either. So there will need to be upskilling and new certifications offered so that people can transition skills they had into this type of energy source. How you will approach the evolution of a diverse supply chain and workforce in this endeavor. And then lastly, if any of your projects are impacting adjacent to or located within an environmental justice identified community per federal government screening, then there are some special considerations that come with that. So our proposal, our workforce, it's definitely inclusive of meeting the objectives of this part of the proposal. And then as a hub as a whole, with the North Dakota node, there's some pretty great developments underway with technical colleges and the tribal colleges really focused on that workforce piece. So while we are very committed to the in Minnesota projects, there is also some hub level components where we hope to lead through our projects in Minnesota regional benefits in these areas specifically. And then just a few notes on the hub execution and financing that are worth mentioning. And this is consistent with all programs offered by the Department of Energy. It is a grant award, and obviously the Inflation Reduction Act that includes the tax credits is a very significant development for hydrogen production. But these grants are a little bit different. While it is really helpful in buying down the cost of these initial investments, it doesn't come first. It's a reimbursement structure. So we, through the negotiation phase that my colleague detailed, are setting up the metrics and the timeline. So what we will build, what we expect it to cost, and by when. We will go and execute upon that plan, and then quarterly and sometimes annually, depending on the component, provide proof of that to the Department of Energy, and then they will provide us back a reimbursement. The funds come after the fact, so it's just a financial note that is important in all of these pursuits, that unfortunately we don't get to spend the DOE money first. We're kind of locked in arms with them through the whole process, and it's just a reimbursement throughout the duration of the program. And I have one last slide, which I just wanted to touch on briefly. We're here to share the initial details of the Heartland Hydrogen Hub, but we wanted to share some of Xcel Energy's success in pursuit of Department of Energy grants this year. So there are 4 significant wins that we're really excited about collaborating with the Department of Energy on. The first, there is a small typo, unfortunately, on this table, and we'll provide revised slide. But the first, the long duration energy storage, that is for the 100-hour battery that we will deploy at the Sherco Power Station, and we'll receive around $35 million for that. And then the grid resilience investments and partnership program, we are going to receive about $27.5 to $28 million for extreme weather resiliency in Minnesota. That's a lot of system hardening, hazard tree removal, that type of activity. The JTIQ, Joint Transmission Interconnection Projects, this is $114 million to buy down the cost of us building 2 transmission lines that will connect the MISO and SPP transmission interconnections. They're called SEAMS projects. And then lastly, up to $560 million for our participation in the Heartland Hydrogen Hub. So, almost $750 million in DOE partnership coming through. And that's the last slide we have. Happy to take your questions.
Thanks, Ms. Valdez. Thanks for Spencer. We do have a list of questions that we're going to start with Chair Acom. Chair Acom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the presenters. I really appreciate you coming and sharing your plan at this point to us. And congratulations on the award of the Hydrogen Hub. I think this is really exciting for Xcel Energy and for Minnesota too. So I have a couple of questions. One is about some of the guidance that's being still drafted by the Department of Treasury around some of the pillars regarding additionality, new resources being made, the hourly versus annually. Wondering, do you have any idea about when that guidance is going to be coming forward?
Ms. Valdez?
Thank you, Chair. Well, they keep delaying. The Treasury Department is definitely getting a lot of input long after they close the formal comment period. We are anxious for them to provide the guidance. The detailed design we need to do will be significantly impacted by what they rule, trying to maximize that production tax credit. We did have the opportunity last week to have a brief meeting with Treasury and stress why nuclear to hydrogen production, we believe to be aligned with the federal priorities. Definitely the Department of Energy, which is already funding a nuclear to hydrogen project that we are deploying, and the importance of including that. So, that is very important to our hub construct, and we tried to further explain that recently. But otherwise, no, I want to say that, they've indicated November, but there's a holiday and lots of things, so I hope it's November.
Chair Akam, anything following up?
Yes, please. I appreciate that. We'll stay tuned. I'm sure you're anxiously awaiting. The other question I have is really about the reimbursement, and in regards to the initial costs. Will that be ratepayer money that is used then, or will that be funded by ratepayers and then reimbursed, or how will that be handled? And then the second question about reimbursements is the amount of reimbursement, will that have anything to do with the end use and whether it's producing, different types of hydrogen, gray, green, pink, and so forth?
You want me to start? Sure. Thank you, Chair. So the reimbursement structure is something we are in conversations with internally and with our regulatory team about how we will structure that and what we might need and where we might need to go with that with the Public Utilities Commission. So we're in early days of thinking through how that cost share will need to be funded. But as you noted, every investment dollar we get from DOE, we're bringing a cost share component. So that will require a regulatory approval ultimately. And what was your second question? My brain just went blank.
The second question.
Oh, yeah, the offtake, sorry. Thank you. So as we understand it, we're in the negotiation phase now, but ultimately it's basically a percentage-based cost share. So that percentage would be applied towards sort of our expense report, our invoice to DOE, not necessarily tied to exactly how you use it. It's sort of a holistic project approval and cost share, and then a reimbursement to the costs on an equivalent basis every time. So not component specific or not fluctuating based upon that.
Chair Akam.
And then just a quick follow-up on that. So does the end use not then impact the reimbursement at all? Or does it? Does how the end use, or whether or not it's, how it's being used, will that impact the reimbursement, or more it's just the larger picture?
Madam Chair, I can answer that. In short, no. It really comes down to what comes into our negotiations with the DOE and what is applicable costs. And so based on our scope and estimates, what we include in that is what applies to the cost share. And so in our estimates, we have minimal dollars spent for the specific offtake. And so in general, the offtake won't affect the reimbursement.
Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Next on the list, we have Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, my question, I have two questions. One is similar to, let me just make sure I heard that properly. So you talked about within the Excel portion of this, a few different applications, the wind and ammonia, and then you called it the clean energy node. So let's say you look at this and you decide, you know what, we want to put all of our focus on wind to ammonia. Does that change any of the reimbursement you would get from DOE?
So again, through our negotiation process with the DOE, we will establish what are the approved scope of the project. And so right now, as we're just starting in the process, we'll be talking through that scope process with the DOE and confirm, yes, this is part of this is in scope and this is not in scope. And so when we get to the approved scope, if it's in, then it's included.
Okay.
Representative Kraft, follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so then my question is, so as you look at, I think, blending this with natural gas, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that hydrogen is a lot less energy intensive than natural gas. So when you blend it, you lose a lot of efficiency. Plus, it is smaller, so there's more of a risk of leakage coming out of pipelines, and it's also more combustible. So why are you interested in blending it with natural gas? You know, what are the, why do that?
Sure.
Mr. Jensen?
So you're close on track with the hydrogen. So hydrogen is different than natural gas, where natural gas is primarily methane. Natural gas does combust and burn differently. Natural gas has a lower energy density when you're looking at it on a volume basis. And because it's smaller, it takes up a much larger volume space, right? Roughly 3 times the space of volume if everything else is equal pressures and things like that. However, when you combust the hydrogen, there's no carbon emissions. And so that gets into the primary importance and value of blending that hydrogen in, is that we reduce the carbon emissions from the total combustion that's happening. And so the more hydrogen that we use, the lower the carbon emissions that ultimately happen. We're involved in multiple industry studies and efforts to answer some of the questions that you posed. Hydrogen is a very small molecule, and so depending on the type of materials and equipment that are in an whether it's a combustion turbine or the pipes and things like that, there can be different risks to take into consideration. It's primarily the type of material that the pipe is made out of, as well as then the pressure that is there. And so there's multiple industry studies, like I said, that we are a part of to better understand that, so that we can design the systems such that we reduce the risks of things like leakage.
Representative Kraft, any follow-up?
Not on that, I have one other question, if I may. Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the urea process, where you're using CO2 from an ethanol plant, would it be a similar thing if that plant were making sustainable aviation fuel, for example, or is there something unique to it being an ethanol plant?
The ethanol plant is part, and I'm not an ethanol expert, but part of the ethanol production process, they emit CO2, and it is generally fairly pure CO2 to use. And so that CO2, if combined with hydrogen, directly with hydrogen, could be used in a sustainable aviation production process, as opposed to the urea uses ammonia and CO2.
Okay, thank you.
Commission Chair,
Answer your
Trent,
question.
may I expand a tiny bit on my colleague's answer?
Yes. Ms. Valdez, expand away.
A few other reasons why it's compelling to us to begin hydrogen blending with natural gas as a blended fuel is that we really believe that there's a lot of great use cases for hydrogen, but we need to get the market going, and we want to start taking full advantage of our renewables, which we'll start to see increasing curtailment. Providing that blended fuel into our system immediately reduces the emissions intensity with little complication at those levels, and starts to prove that the hydrogen is there. Earlier this year, another Department of Energy program was focused on industrial decarbonization, and we were quite excited about it when we read it and approached many of our industrial customers in Minnesota, and they all declined to participate in it with us. They all felt that it would, on their side too, same thing. They have to invest to get the cost share, that it was premature for them to make investments for the use of clean hydrogen in their facilities because they weren't confident that the hydrogen was available. So it's a great way to start to build that confidence, provide immediate emissions reduction benefits, but also not permanently commit. I don't know exactly how much hydrogen we would be using in a combustion turbine in 2050, but we could get started in 2030. And then one other consideration that we believe was compelling is that the Environmental Protection Agency has proposed their rules for gas generation to reduce the carbon intensity there. And they have 2 pathways you can choose. There's many steps you evaluate if your unit must be controlled. One is carbon capture, and the other is blending with clean hydrogen and growing that percentage over time. So we feel it also provides us that opportunity for future EPA compliance, which we expect we will have to do, where eventually you have hydrogen generation in the future, but the blend is just the initial step.
Thanks, Ms. Valdez. Representative Kraft?
Thank you, I'm good.
All right, next I have on the list, Representative Igo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you again for being here today. Going back, looking over your presentation, I see that, the phase 2 talks a lot about the developing, permitting, and the financing. I guess I'm just curious, could you give us a brief idea of what the permitting would look like on the state side and on the federal side?
So, thank you for the question. The federal side, the environmental process does go through the NEPA process. And we have representatives actually in DC today, tomorrow, talking about that process. So, with the inclusion of federal funds, we are automatically go through the NEPA process, which we're still getting into and learning about. The state process will also be subject to, depending on exact locations, quantities of hydrogen stored on site is a big thing. There's some OSHA rules around that, as well as other air permits based on end use that we would have to be looking into as well.
Representative Igo, any follow-up?
Just a quick follow-up. So thank you for that, because this is something that I'm deeply concerned about, is when we start looking at projects like this and this kind of investment, having 2 years slated for permitting in the state of Minnesota is concerning to me, that we're not gonna be able to get there on time. And I think that's an important conversation for this room to have, is that permitting reform is something we're really gonna need to work on if we're gonna hit these goals that you have outlined here. So I just wanted to get a quick outline on that, and thank you. It's something I'm gonna be working on.
Thanks, Representative. Senator Pratt and then Senator Green. And members, we're hoping to wrap up the hydrogen stuff in 5 minutes, give or take, to keep on schedule. Senator Pratt.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, in preparation for this, I've been away from the energy sector for a few years, and it seems like there's a number of different processes that you can use in order to produce hydrogen. Look like electrolysis, forgive my pronunciations, electrolysis, thermolysis, and thermal electrolysis. And can you maybe, for a beginner, explain those different processes and which one you intend to use?
Mr. Jensen.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and question. Today, the vast majority of hydrogen produced today is using a method called steam methane reformation, where it essentially takes natural gas and steam and a lot of heat, breaks that natural gas and the methane apart into hydrogen gas and then carbon monoxide, and then it goes through another process, ultimately venting carbon dioxide. Again, that's the traditional process that's used today, referred to as gray hydrogen, not what we're pursuing at all. We are focused primarily on electrolysis, which you input electricity and water, and the electricity goes through a series of a stack of materials to split that hydrogen, the H2O, or split the water, the H2O, into hydrogen and oxygen gases. There are some different methods of doing that: low temperature electrolysis or high temperature electrolysis. High temperature electrolysis is the type that's going into our Prairie Island hydrogen pilot program. That is a less developed, not yet commercialized type of technology versus the lower temperature electrolysis, which is what we're generally focused on for the Heartland Hydrogen Hub. There's a couple other technologies and methods for hydrogen production. The majority of the rest are all still in more developmental, early technology levels.
Senator Pratt, any follow-up?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So can you give me a sense of what the initial CapEx on an electrolysis project would be?
Mr. Jensen.
So in our Heartland Hydrogen Hub application, the CapEx for both of our nodes was roughly $2 billion. The cost for an electrolysis project itself, looking at information from the Electric Power Research Institute, EPRI, are expecting those costs to be somewhere in the range of $2,600 per kilowatt to $4,000 per kilowatt. That would include both electrolysis and balance of plant. Depending on the size of your plant is going to where that range comes into play. Generally speaking, the larger megawatt size plant you put in, the lower end of that range you're going to be.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I really wasn't expecting that answer, so thank you very much. How does that compare to, say, a kilowatt of electricity that's being produced today? And most of my research was talking about hydrogen costs in kilograms versus kilowatts. And how much would it cost? What are you seeing? I think the data I was looking at was somewhat stale, so maybe what does it cost to produce a kilogram of hydrogen, and how would that convert over to kilowatt?
Mr. Jensen.
Sure. If I can change that from kilowatts and talk about MMBTUs, which is more direct translation to natural gas. Generally speaking, so the Department of Energy has what they call their one-shot or moonshot program, where their goal is to have $1 per kilogram hydrogen in 10 years. And the hydrogen hubs are meant to help further that along. Today, the gray hydrogen made with that steam methane reformation and natural gas, the commodity prices for hydrogen is typically around $2 to $3 per kilogram. If you went out to buy green hydrogen today, that commodity price is going to be somewhere above $6 per kilogram. But with the hydrogen production tax credit from the IRA that Madam Chairman mentioned, as well as the low-cost renewables that we are looking at, our hydrogen hub applications proposed costs in under $4 per kilogram hydrogen there. So 1 kilogram of hydrogen is roughly, or $1 per kilogram hydrogen would be roughly $7.50 to $8 per MMBTU. And where today commodity cost for gas per MMBTU, I think today's price is around $3 per MMBTU. Last summer it was as high as $7 to $8.
Thank you, Mr. Jensen.
I'm sorry,
Senator-
could he repeat the cost for the hydrogen MMBTU?
Mr. Jensen, could you repeat the cost for the hydrogen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
$1 per kilogram hydrogen is roughly $7.50 to $8 per MMBTU.
Thank you. Senator Pratt, can we move on to Senator Green? I
We
wanna,
may, thank you very much.
Cause any of our next set of witnesses to get any less time. Senator Green,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is this on?
I hope so.
Okay. Luckily, my other question was answered, but I do have a couple. I was looking at your map, and, you've got some deadlines here, some phases you want to meet, some goals, I guess. But according to the map, you've got future connection to the Liberty mode. So my first question is, you're talking about some pretty close deadlines. What is the transmission lines right now as far as being able to carry, should this even work, carry the electricity from the clean energy to you?
Mr. Jensen.
And Mr. Chair, I can start talking even faster if you need me to. Or just cut me off when you need to.
No, just, where's the transmission now? I think he's asking.
Yeah, so transmission of hydrogen gas, or if you can, or the electricity itself.
The electricity itself?
Yeah, so our focus around both our wind to ammonia node, the wind to ammonia node is putting electrolysis right next to a wind farm that is, that we have a lot of data around, that has one of our more constrained wind farms. And so there wouldn't be a significant transmission cost involved in that project. We're co-locating essentially behind the meter the electrolysis at the wind farm. With our clean energy node, that one we waiting with the IRA rules. It will be our intent to locate one-to-many hydrogen production facilities as close to either end use or the electric use as possible to minimize those types of transmission costs.
Thanks, Mr. Jensen. Senator Green?
Well, I don't know that that's really what I was looking for, but I'm going to move on. You've got phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and 4. And you talk about your reimbursements for those. And they also talked about the goals you had, but I don't see any of those goals. Do you have the detailed plan that you talk about here? And then I'll just add this in and then I'll be done. If there were no funding from the Department of Energy and no grants coming in, would this be viable?
Mr.
Even
Jensen.
not only now, but into the future?
Mr. Jensen.
So our application to the DOE included multiple milestones, go-no-go decisions for every phase and down through that schedule. And now all of that is on the table through the negotiation process that we will be editing and or confirming as we go through those conversations with the DOE. Is all of this possible without the Department of Energy? We believe it is, but we are also skeptically curious to know what level of viability that is. Certainly without the DOE funding, that changes our timelines. But we do see the use of hydrogen as an important part of our decarbonization efforts as we as we kind of laid out already.
Thanks, Mr. Jensen. Thanks, Senator Green. All right, members, thanks very much for the discussion on hydrogen. Thank you, Mr. Jensen. Thanks, Ms. Valdez.
Thank you.
We'll move on now to the second agenda item, which is community solar gardens. In your packet, you have various materials relating to this. Members, we have two basic questions before us on community solar gardens. One, what are the costs to ratepayers? And I think a larger question for us, which is there a better way for us to decarbonize? Republican and Democrat, House and Senate, we want to decarbonize. We're just going to have that as a principle of the LEC as long as I got the gavel here, which is at least another 45 minutes. Into that, then, we're asking members to take a look at our goals as stated in section 216, and that is to have utility rates that are 5% below the national average. We'll get a little background on the solar program, the community solar garden program, but a little history here is that we had revisited the issue between the House and Senate and talked about what the best way to decarbonize is, and into that for all our programs, looking at the issue of cost. Community solar program deserve a tip of the cap to the speaker, Representative Melissa Hortman. Part of the goal of the community solar garden program is to develop a solar market in Minnesota, and on that, the community solar garden program has clearly been a success. Where we are now, we're asking members, take a look at where it is now. What is our best path forward? Into that, the House and Senate and Conference Committee agreed to a new program to begin January 1st. At the time, there was discussion about the so-called above market cost, and each of the witnesses you'll be hearing from today will talk a little bit about that. Above market cost is a general description of what it costs to buy solar and what it is through the community solar garden program. At the time, we had the number 110 million at Conference Committee. That is a number that many people offered a thought on. In July, the Public Utilities Commission received Xcel Energy's new information on the new program. Those numbers are submitted to Commerce. Commerce's role is, of course, to review the assumptions made by Xcel Energy and then report back to the Public Utilities Commission. In your packets, members, you'll see what's called, I did not think this title, a public document. And on there is the results of that review, in which you see the amount of energy purchased in what's called the fuel clause. I mean, to steal your thunder, just going through this, Ms. Rozier. This is what I'm asking members to take a look at today, which is what are we paying for solar? What is the best way to decarbonize? Again, our presentation is that we want to decarbonize and look for the best methods. Among that information in July is that the Public Utilities Commission has now approved the new numbers going forward, and the above market costs, we're going to hear some testimony about today. We'll hear from the Public Utilities Commission, Department of Commerce, Xcel Energy, and then we have some other individual witnesses. It is my hope to get us out of here as close to 3 o'clock as possible, and to that end, I know that we have used a little more time. We can go late if members want, but with that, into this question, we're inviting Michelle Rozier, am I pronouncing that correctly? From the Regulatory Affairs Division of the Public Utilities Commission. Ms. Rozier, welcome to the Legislative Energy Commission. Please introduce yourself and fire away.
Thank you, Chair Franson, Chair Akums, and members of the Legislative Energy Commission. I'm Michelle Rozier. I'm the Regulatory Analysis Division Manager at the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission, and I'll be presenting on the Commission's work on the Community Solar Gardens, or CSG. So as you know, CSGs were established in statute in 2013, and that statute required Xcel to offer the CSG program with third-party developers and enabled other utilities to do the same. And as of 2023, only Xcel offers CSG under the statute, but according to the Clean Energy Resource Teams, 38 other utilities offer utility-owned CSG. I'm not going to read everything on this slide, but it's a program timeline of the Commission's work on what's now known as the Legacy CSG program with Xcel. And some things of note here. Xcel first submitted their initial plan September 2013, and through several iterations and some settlement negotiations with some of the parties, the final program was ultimately approved in December of 2015. So it took about 2 years to establish the Legacy CSG program. Over the past 10 years, We at the commission have done things like established the value of solar, which was first established in 2017 and then updated annually, as well as dealt with a number of co-location disputes. So initially, some of the projects were much bigger than what we have now landed on as 1 megawatt for the legacy program. And then we also dealt with a number of engineering disputes during the review of early CSG, and something that's continued throughout the 10 years. More recently, as of 2020, we've been seeing issues around planned outages. So when Xcel de-energizes its system for some other use, and then it impacts the CSG's production, and therefore the bill credits their subscribers earn. And we've also been dealing with some issues around how the bill credits impact other program applicability, specifically around low-income programs or when the customer is a tenant. So those are some things that we have issued orders on in the last few years. During the same time frame, this shows you the total cumulative installed distributed energy resource, or DER, capacity in the state, which is just about 1.3 gigawatts, of which these different colors show different types of DERs, with the dark blue being community solar gardens. And just of note, in December of 2022, Xcel's legacy CSG program accounted for about 60% of all DER capacity in the state. So very much a driver in DERs. On the right here is an example of Xcel's dashboard that they report to us. So this is from October of 2023. And in Xcel's legacy program, there are 485 project sites for a total of 886 megawatts. Most of those applications, 742, are on the older pre-2017 applicable retail rate, and I'm going to talk about those rates some more later. And 198 receive a value of solar rate. Overall, there are just under 33,000 subscribers of CSG, and that accounts to bill credits that in September of 2023 were $18 million a month. So in 2022, the average residential customer, so this is all customers, not just CSG subscribers, paid about $3.70 a month for CSG bill credits through the fuel clause. And this is important later, but 377 CSG applications are in progress. And so when we talk about moving from the legacy to the department program, one of the issues the commission needed to address is where's the cutoff of who gets to stay in the legacy program versus who would go to a different program. And then there are 79, again, this is as of October, 79 applications that weren't yet deemed complete. Okay, so this is some of what Senator Frentz was talking about with the fuel clause and the CSG costs. And this chart is showing you in the second column, the forecast in 2022. The third column is the actuals, and then I also offer the 2024 fuel clause forecast. So CSG costs in the fuel clause are the CSG bill credits paid to subscribers. There is a separate financial relationship between the subscriber and the developer for the project. CSG bill credits are more than 3 times the cost per megawatt hour than gas, solar, and wind PPAs in the fuel clause. And I believe you'll hear some testimony about why that might be.
Ms. Roser, do you mind just walking the commission through PPAs and the distinction there?
Oh, sorry, yeah. A power purchase agreement would be, for instance, if Xcel partnered with a developer on a utility scale solar or wind project.
Thank you.
Okay, so only in Minnesota's jurisdiction pays the above market cost for CSG. So we share Xcel's resources with other states. Sometimes the Dakotas, sometimes Wisconsin. It depends on a number of issues, who's all involved. But for above market cost for CSG, which is the bill credit above the locational marginal price, only Minnesota pays those costs. And then except for PPAs, the fuel clause does, and this is a typo on my slide, seeing who is paying close attention. The fuel clause does not include capital or other O&M costs for generation, and that's including CSGs. So there's a little bit of a difference in terms of some people will say like, well, Excel got paid by ratepayers to build a power plant in capital costs. And similarly, the CSG has that separate financial relationship with their subscriber. So it is not an apples to apples comparison. What is a CSG bill credit versus what are other fuel clause costs? So I'm just trying to paint a little bit of that picture. The current cost allocation is that Minnesota's jurisdiction of CSG costs are allocated to customer classes the same way all other fuel costs are allocated. Now, the commission entertained a question, and it's in an open docket, about whether or not we should change that. And so Excel proposed to allocate to the customer class based on the class's subscribed CSG capacity, or alternatively, to assign directly to the CSG subscribers. There are a number of parties that have weighed in on that issue. It'll come before the commission for a decision. The department recommends no change in the current allocation. And then just a note about the percentages on this chart. It is percentages of total costs or percentages of total electricity in the fuel clause. Okay, and then I mentioned the bill credits. There are two types of bill credits under Excel's legacy program, and then there is the new bill credit that the 2023 legislation established for what will be the department's program. So the applicable retail rate is for pre-2017 CSG applications, and it varies depending on customer class, but it's anywhere between, at this point in 2023, 13 cents and 19 cents a kilowatt hour. And again, because most of the subscribers in capacity is in that applicable retail rate, most of the bill credits paid fall under that rate. And so it was 14.6 million in September of 2023, and it was nearly 21,000 subscribers. That rate changes annually at the commission. The value of solar rate established in 2017 and then updated each year since applies based on when an application was deemed complete. So we may have some CSG that are not yet in operation, but when they go into operation, might be on the 2019 value of solar rate, because it's taken that long to go through the process and build the project. The 2023 rate, this is levelized across all 25 years, is about 13 cents a kilowatt hour. So in year one, that's actually 10.6 cents. And in year 25 would be about 19 cents, but it's an established 25-year schedule that's in tariff, so we know what those costs will be, and they don't change annually outside of that established tariff. And then lastly, the average retail rate was set in statute, and so there is no 2023 rate because the program's not operational yet, but we just calculated that rate for a decision last week, and it would vary depending on customer class and income eligibility between about 6.6 cents and 14 cents a kilowatt hour, and then that would be updated annually. I'm conscious that you are trying to go quick, so I'm gonna skip over the regulatory topics. I'm happy to come back to them if people have specific questions. I did want to cover the decisions that were made last week because they're new and may be of interest.
Sure.
And so this slide offers dates and dockets for commission orders and notices related to some of the topics I jumped over. But I wanted to call attention to the commission's June 27th, 2023 order. It approved a change to the 2023 applicable retail rate where Excel flagged that by removing the fuel clause compounding effect, they estimated about $4.6 million a year in bill credits that you, depending on which side of the coin you look at, either 4.6 million less for those subscribers or 4.6 million saved for the customers, the ratepayers. And so the commission did approve that change in the 2023 ARR. Similarly, the commission is taking comments now through December 22nd on whether to transfer those CSG subscribers on the applicable retail rate to a VOS rate. So that's an open docket and people are welcome to comment. And then just last week, in the legislation, there was a number of directives to the commission to resolve as the department sets up their new program. And so we made the following decisions, and I want to say the commission speaks through its order. So I'm just giving you my report, but please read the order. We are allowing CSGs applications that were deemed complete before January 1st of next year to stay in the legacy program if they would like. So you'll recall there was about 377 applications that weren't sure whether they would be able to stay in legacy or move, and now there is more certainty around that. The department's program's bill credits, the average retail rate, we set the process for that. They will be established annually, and that people will know what that rate will be in February with a chance to object. Otherwise, the new rate will go into effect in April. That's consistent with how the legacy project works. We are requiring Excel to implement consolidated billing no later than January 1st of 2025 and start reporting on the progress towards getting there beginning early next year. We set an annual participation fee of $500 a megawatt for legacy and non-legacy CSG, and an application fee of $4,125 a megawatt prorated for non-legacy CSG, and that's to recover the costs of consolidated billing. And we also established how eligible customers will be exempt from CSG costs in the fuel clause. So there was a thing about billing assistant eligible customers, so we set that process. Happy to go into the detail if you want. And then Excel will retain the renewable energy credits for the non-legacy projects. There were some other decisions, but those were the main ones.
Thanks, Ms. Rozier. Excellent. Members, I'm going to start off with a couple questions of my own, and then we'll go to member questions per witness. It looks to me like we're going to be 5, maybe 10 minutes over. Is anyone jumping out of their chair objecting to that time frame? Seeing no jumping. Some basics for us, and thank you for your testimony. The $329 million represents what for the coming year for Excel ratepayers?
So I believe you're talking back on slide 6 of the CSG total costs. And so that is both the costs that are above market and market or below. And so that is the forecast that Excel is estimating CSGs will cost in 2024.
And the PUC has approved Excel for charging Excel ratepayers that amount in the coming year?
The way that the fuel clause works is that we approve a forecast and then we do a true up.
True up.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And the fuel clause contains all of the costs for Excel to purchase energy. What percentage of Excel's energy or electricity, if you prefer, is the Community Solar Garden program?
Yeah, so if you look at this chart and look at 2022 actuals, because it's, I think, the best thing to look at for that question, total CSG costs were 19.4% of the fuel clause and 5% of the energy sales.
Thank you. Members, questions for Ms. Rozier? All right, thank you very much, and thanks for moving it along. Our next witness, I believe online is the Department of Commerce, and that would be Deputy Commissioner Michelle Grancy. Ms. Grancy, are you there?
Yes, it will be just a moment as we get our technology switched here. And if Ms. Rozier can stop sharing her screen, I believe we can go ahead and do that.
I think we're on that, Deputy Commissioner, just 1 minute.
There we go.
Try again. Yeah.
There. We can see you. Now we can't.
When they're talking, we can.
Are you able to hear me?
We are, and now we can see what I believe is your slide deck. Fire away, Deputy Commissioner. Welcome to the LEC.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, co-chair friends, co-chair ACOM, and committee members. For the record, I'm Michelle Ramsey. I serve as the Deputy Commissioner of Energy at the Minnesota Department of Commerce. And I'm joined here today by Louise Miltich, Assistant Commissioner of Regulatory Affairs, also at the department. As the ratepayer public interest advocate, perhaps it's not surprising that we're currently at the NARUC Energy Conference. So we apologize for not being able to be in the room with you today, but also here from Commerce with us is John Kelly, Director of Government Affairs, who is in the room with you. So the department is first and foremost a consumer protection agency that oversees over 40 industries from financial institutions to insurance to energy. We work to engage people and community in the work that we do while lifting up 5 strategic priorities: to protect the public interest, serve as a trusted resource, reduce economic barriers, support Minnesotans in being resilient to the impacts of climate change, and to ensure a strong, competitive, and fair marketplace. The Division of Energy Resources is made up of 4 offices where we work on behalf of the public interest through technical assistance, market transformation, engagement advocacy, and policy and program development and implementation related to clean energy, as well as energy affordability, reliability, and security. Minnesota Statute 216B.1641 established one of the first in the nation community solar garden legislation in 2013, with significant growth in CSGs between 2017 and 18 and declining growth since 2019. In 2022, solar as a whole contributed 3.2% of the state's electricity generation, while renewables in total made up 32%. The pace of solar installation of any kind in Minnesota has slowed considerably since 2017, including community solar gardens. At the same time, the pace of installations in the country as a whole have accelerated. In fact, we fell to 34th in the country last year for total solar installations. According to the International Energy Agency, putting the world on a path to achieve net zero emissions by 2050 requires a substantial increase of capital-intensive clean energy assets, such as wind, solar PV, electric vehicles, and hydrogen electrolyzers, which have relatively high upfront investment costs and lower operating and fuel expenditures over time. In Minnesota, we have seen this with the advent of community solar gardens, which under the initial higher applicable retail rate drove significant market growth for solar in Minnesota. This happened through both statutory language and the 2014 Minnesota PUC, who established the ARR as the cost needed to stand up the program. As you can see in this graph, community solar has been the significant contributor to overall installations of solar, and thus the overall Minnesota solar capacity at approximately 60% of Minnesota's total installed. Based on data provided in Excel's 2023 annual fuel clause adjustment position, Excel projects that in 2024, legacy CSGs will produce 2,312 gigawatt hours of electricity at a cost of approximately 14.24 cents per kilowatt hour. We understand that as of March 2023, there were 737 solar gardens receiving the ARR and 190 gardens under the BOSS. 14.6 million in bill credits paid based on ARR gardens and 3.3 million for those gardens under the BOSS. Under the new LMI, or low to moderate income accessible program, the cost to ratepayers will depend on the subscriber mix and whether the 100 megawatt capacity is reached in 2024. Assuming the capacity is reached, we anticipate the per kilowatt hour cost of the program to range anywhere from 9.59 cents per kilowatt hour to 13.86 cents per kilowatt hour. When we look then at energy decisions, it is often the case that we acknowledge traditional fossil fuel or host communities that derive their livelihood and tax base from having a coal plant in their backyard. Similarly, if we look to host communities' costs and benefits for community solar gardens, there are costs from initial investment, and there's also benefits to the community. For example, a number of local governments have engaged in community solar gardens here in Minnesota, saving money so that they decrease energy costs historically passed on to taxpayers. For example, the city of St. Cloud is subscribed to over 22 million kilowatt hours of energy from community solar gardens. These public interest subscribers are also participating and able to invest those savings in their mission and core functions. Another example, the one on the screen, St. Paul Public Housing Authority, or agency rather, in St. Paul, Minnesota, provides affordable housing to more than 21,000 low-income individuals and families throughout the city, managing
Ms. Granzi?
4,200 rental units.
Deputy
Yes.
Commissioner? Sorry to interrupt, but whenever I think we may want to emphasis on a point, when you say costs passed on from St. Cloud or St. Paul, I think we understand you're talking about infrastructure costs that a city may have incurred. Who are those costs passed on to under Minnesota's Community Solar Garden Program? Still there, Deputy Commissioner?
I am, Co-Chair. So if you were asking who are the costs of the subscription, the costs are passed on to the ratepayers.
Thank you. Go ahead, continue.
So the St. Paul Public Housing Agency, which provides affordable housing to more than 21,000 low-income households, managing 4,200 rental units, will save more than $3 million in electricity costs that they have now committed to reinvesting in their affordable housing programs. So let's talk generation costs and fuel costs. You heard Ms. Rozier note it's not apples to apples. While identifying the benefits to the public interest, one of the key components of any energy decision is indeed cost. These costs are often directly communicated as fuel clause costs. However, because different types of generation are handled differently within the fuel clause, it is not possible for us, with the information we have today, to make meaningful comparisons of fuel clause costs and kilowatt hours across generation types. For example, company-owned solar generation has a fuel cost of $0 per kilowatt hour. In 2022, purchased wind had a fuel clause cost of 3.781 cents per kilowatt hour. Yet it's not reasonable to conclude that the cost to ratepayers of purchased wind far exceeds that of owned solar. So if we continue with this, thinking about those key ingredients to the fuel clause and to costs, there are comparisons that are further complicated because for some resources, only fuel costs are counted in the fuel clause. One such example is natural gas generation. The natural gas line item in the fuel clause includes the cost of fuel and transportation of that fuel. We were to think of that as ingredients within, say, an apple pie. This fuel and transportation costs would equal the apples needed to make the apple pie. Yet there are many additional ratepayer expenses associated with the gas facility that are not folded into the fuel clause, like the cost to ratepayers of capital, operation, maintenance, insurance, et cetera. You could think of this as the flour, sugar, butter, spice needed to make a complete apple pie. In the case of CSGs, the fuel cost of the apple pie is represented in the fuel clause. So finally, cost comparisons are especially difficult because CSG fuel clause costs are skewed toward Minnesota ratepayers. As we all know, Minnesota is only a portion of Excel's territory. More CSG costs are associated to Excel's Minnesota ratepayers fuel clause than to Excel ratepayers in other jurisdictions. For other generation types like coal, fuel costs are more evenly shared across jurisdictions. So where does that leave us? The Minnesota legislature has set forth multiple goals that must be balanced, including clean electricity, increased solar, low rates, and low-income assistance, among others. There are multiple important perspectives in this room and elsewhere to be considered. One that we hope is not lost in the struggle is the reality that we, as all states, have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to both increase solar and, in particular, community solar gardens focused on supporting an equitable transition to a clean energy future through the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA. Now, the IRA has stackable incentives. If you think of it like cake, I guess we were thinking a lot about food while making the slide deck. IRA incentives emphasize distributed solar, with the Biden administration initiatives explicitly promoting community solar models. IRA solar tax credits are lucrative, with the maximum benefits going to projects that deliver to low-income communities. CSGs are well positioned to take advantage of the full tax credits. Utility scale solar and other distributed solar models will have a harder time showing the full range of benefits, likely maxing out at a 30 to 40% investment tax credit, while CSGs will be able to receive up to 60 or 70%. So for instance, a hypothetical 1 megawatt community solar facility costing $1 million could earn a 70% tax credit worth $700,000. In addition, if it's owned by a tax exempt entity, this could be a direct cash payment from the IRA. The $7 billion IRA Solar for All program matches well to a CSG Model 2. Commerce, with multiple partners, submitted in October a Solar for All application for the maximum allowed for Minnesota of $100 million, including $35 million that, if awarded, will go to low-income community solar garden lending. One caveat for this discussion is to keep in mind that the current CSG law is not set up to ensure that the benefits from these tax provisions flow maximally to low-income subscribers or recapture any tax benefit for general ratepayers. So coming back really briefly, and then I'll close, to the CSG program within Excel territory. This has been an Excel program. The Minnesota legislature, as you know, modified that this session and charged Commerce with standing up a new LMI accessible version of the program in accordance with the recently passed legislation. So finally, what type of solar will we need to meet 2040? Both utility scale and distributed. What is the best way to get distributed solar? In essence, the legislature has asked us to run the experiment and report back. What will happen now? Commerce will launch the revised CSG program in January as directed. This program establishes caps on megawatts that decline with time. Meanwhile, the legislation passed this year defines a second program where Excel and other utilities will be required to acquire distributed solar through competitive bidding that also establishes caps on megawatts that decline with time. These two mandates will allow us to compare CSG and other DG procurement for price, inclusive of IRA credits and other values like service to LMI consumers. We will then report back through the CSG solar report, also mandated by 2023 legislation, which we anticipate will include comparisons between distributed solar and community solar gardens. We look forward to a future meeting next year where we can dig into the results of the report and the progress of the new CSG program. Thank you for your time. And with that, we will stand for questions.
Thank you very much, Deputy Commissioner. I actually have a couple questions, but first I have Assistant Commissioner Miltich on the list. Is she planning to offer additional testimony or simply there to support you in your testimony?
She is here for Q&A. We were going to do it together, but with technology, it worked better to do it.
I appreciate that. All right. Thank you very much again, Deputy Commissioner. In the Department of Commerce's capacity for consumer protection, would it be fair to say that one of your considerations is ratepayer cost?
Yes, it is.
And the legacy program set to go forward on January 1st would allow the introduction of a new set of 20 to 25-year contracts. Is that your understanding?
Mr. Chair, yes, that's correct.
And is one of your concerns the cost currently being borne by XL ratepayers of the existing decade, give or take, of the community solar garden program?
Yes, Mr. Chair, cost is always one of the considerations when we assess the public interest proposition.
Ms. Miltich, is that you?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to the LEC. Well then, Ms. Miltich, my question is, the chart in what's labeled public document that lists the various fuel clause costs gives us an estimated cost per kilowatt hour for non-community solar garden costs. What is that cost in 2022?
Mr. Chair, I don't have that table directly in front of me at this moment in time.
Okay, and members, we received some documents a little late. Ms. Miltich, if it lists on the chart I'm looking at $61.73 per dollars per megawatt hour for non-CSG solar, does that sound right to you?
Mr. Chair, that is consistent with my memory.
And that same thank you, Ms. Miltich, and that same document lists the 2024 forecast for CSG solar at $142 per kilowatt hour. Does that sound right, Ms. Miltich?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thanks, members. Any other questions? Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, we don't have that same spreadsheet in our packets. I'm wondering if that can be distributed after the meeting.
Thank you, Senator. I do think we're having the LCC staff email it out. Again, we received some of these documents less than an hour before the hearing. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just a quick question for the Department of Commerce. As I was looking over this document that was in our packets, testimony on the cost of community solar garden programs, I go down to the bottom of page 1 and it starts, historically, approximately 1/3 of the cost of the value of solar has been derived from avoiding emissions of greenhouse gases. It talks that cost of value of solar was around $99 per megawatt hour. So assuming that the value of the value of greenhouse gas emission avoidance was right around $33.
Senator, are you possibly looking at the written testimony of Dr. Gabe Chan, which was
I am.
Okay.
That's
because
different?
we still hope to have Dr. Chan testify here in a minute.
Oh, okay, well then I'll hold my question. I'll hold my question for that because it has to do with, I assume that this was coming from the Department of Commerce because there's a link that I was trying to get to and I couldn't reach. That was in the footnotes. So I'll hold my question till
Okay,
then.
thanks. Members, any other questions before we go to the next witness? All right, thank you very much, Deputy Commissioner Grancy, Assistant Commissioner Miltich. With that, XL Energy, Nick Pollock, the Manager for Regulatory Analysis. And Mr. Pollock, you can probably see what I'm going to say next, which is we are hustling. If there's a way you could keep your testimony in the 4 or 5 minute range, is that possible?
Certainly.
Members can ask questions. Thank you. Please introduce yourself and present your testimony.
Co-chairs, members, thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about community solar gardens. I thought I'd start off by providing a brief background on the community solar garden program and the drivers of the cost of the program. Our customers participate in the garden program by buying subscriptions from third-party garden operators. These subscriptions are generally 25 years long, and subscribers receive bill credits over that 25-year period. Subscribers to the gardens that originated before 2017 receive a bill credit at the applicable retail rate. This applicable retail rate is a measure of the company's revenue divided by sales for each customer class and ranges from 13 to 15 cents per today. The subscriber also generally receives a 2-cent adder for the renewable energy credit, bringing the total compensation to 15 to 17 cents today. Subscribers to the gardens that originated between 2017 and 2023 receive bill credits at the value of solar rate. Each year, a new value of solar vintage is calculated with a series of 25 years of pricing. Today, the price for each of the vintages ranges between 9 and 11 cents and escalates by 2 to 3% per year. For gardens that originate after 2024 and after, subscribers receive the bill credits at the average retail rate or a percentage thereof. Today, the bill credit ranges approximately from 7 to 14 cents, depending on the customer's class of service, and for residential customers, whether they are income qualified. It generally takes between 2 or 3 years before a garden can go from origination to producing energy for the program. So it will be a couple of years before these new gardens are producing energy. Bill credits paid to the subscribers are recovered and paid for by all Xcel Energy customers through the fuel line on their bill. To arrive at the cost that goes into the fuel portion on the customer bill, we first separate the cost of the garden bill credits into a market-based portion and an above market portion. The market portion is based on the price we purchase energy from the market as settled by the Midwest Independent System Operator, MISO. All costs above this market price is aptly named above market cost. This market and above market calculation is done on an hourly basis, so it reflects the dynamics of the local power market over the course of the year. Minnesota customers pay for their share of the market-based CSG costs based on sales and pay for all costs that are considered above market. This year, we expect the Minnesota share of the garden program to be over $200 million. And that concludes my remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pollack. We already had a wager going here whether you would make it under 4, you win that round. Members, any question for Mr. Pollack? Am I saying that right?
You are. Thanks.
Mr. Pollack? Members, any questions? Thank you very much for your testimony. Appreciate it very much. Members, next on our list is Dr. Gabriel Chan from the University of Minnesota. Dr. Chan. Oh, Dr. Chan, there's an updated list, and I jumped out of order, but stay there and let's have your testimony. And then on deck, we would have Mr. Kevin Pranis from Lyuna. Dr. Chan, thank you for your patience today. Thanks for your written testimony. Members, you should have the written testimony in your packet. I know Senator Pratt does. And I again apologize for the timing. We're hoping your testimony can be 3-4 minutes, if that's okay. Understanding we have already provided all the members a copy of your written testimony. Dr. Chan.
Great. Thank you, Co-Chair Acom, Co-Chair Friends, and members of the LEC for the opportunity to testify this morning. As mentioned, my name is Gabe Chan. I'm an associate professor at the University of Minnesota, appearing today on my own behalf as a researcher and private citizen. I want to answer 3 brief questions about the Community Solar Garden Program. First, is the program compatible with the public interest? Second, how does it impact customer bills? And third, is the way that those costs are recovered equitable? So first, is the program compatible with the public interest? Economic principles propose that investments that have benefits to society in excess of costs are compatible with the public interest. And once determined to be compatible with the public interest, whether investments actually do materially advance the public interest requires a separate and additional analysis of costs and benefits to specific subgroups of the population. So with this framing in mind, to answer the question, yes, I do think the program is compatible with the public interest. And the reason is because Minnesota statute provides guidance on the law's definition of benefits of distributed solar resources based on the value to the utility, its customers, and society. Statute directed the Department of Commerce to conduct a robust stakeholder process to quantify the benefit streams of distributed solar, including the value of energy, its delivery, generation capacity, transmission capacity, line losses, and environmental value, and then seek commission approval for the methodology. It did so in 2014, and that's updated annually by Xcel Energy and approved by the commission. As mentioned earlier, historically, approximately 1/3 of the value of solar has been derived from avoiding the emissions of greenhouse gases. In 2024, the annual value of solar was estimated at $99 per megawatt hour, or 9.9 cents per kilowatt hour. However, the commission recently approved an updated valuation of greenhouse gas emissions. If that update was to pass through to the value of solar, this would increase that figure to $200 per megawatt hour. With this updated approved methodology and greenhouse gas valuation, this suggests that any distributed solar generation with a cost below $200 per megawatt hour is compatible with the public interest because total benefits to society will be greater than the total cost to society. In simple terms, when a utility pays a price less than the value of the energy resources, everyone can benefit. This is the same test that utilities apply in all of their proposed spending and other resources. And based on current costs of renewables, there's a lot of beneficial clean energy that we can build. There are a lot of important caveats to this conclusion, and I detail those in my testimony. I'll skip over for the sake of time. Next, I want to turn to how does the CSG program impact customer bills? The costs of the CSG program are covered differently from utility-owned renewable energy projects because CSGs are not owned by the utility. When a CSG project is developed, a private developer invests their own capital and recovers their costs by charging subscribers a subscription fee, retaining any margin above their cost as profit. In turn, subscribers receive payments from Xcel Energy for every kilowatt hour their subscribed energy project puts back onto the grid. And this is a kind of performance payment because CSG subscribers are only paid when their projects produce energy that gets put onto the grid. This is different from how utilities are paid based on cost recovery. Xcel pays the subscribers the commission-approved rate and recovers this cost by considering a component of its cost of fuel. But this cost of fuel from CSGs is then assigned to all Xcel customers in Minnesota, proportional to their energy consumption. Currently, the normalized tariff paid to CSGs on the fuel clause is $144 per megawatt hour as forecasted for 2023. But this is primarily driven over 80% by projects that were built or started construction in started application in the first 2 years of the program when compensation rates were significantly higher. But, and as designed in 2013, the legislative design of the program brings that compensation down to exactly the value of solar in subsequent years. Those higher costs in the early years of the program were further increased by the Commission when it decided to value the benefits that CSGs were providing to Xcel Energy to comply with its solar energy standard, which added $20 per megawatt hour to the cost of these early projects. I'll skip ahead now and say that we've heard a lot about the above market cost of CSGs. This is quite a complex notion. Some of the existing methodologies are quite confusing, to be honest. In some filings, parties before the Commission have taken the position that CSG costs should be compared to the short-term market prices for wholesale energy, but wholesale energy prices are only a part of the value of delivered energy used in homes and businesses. This is an inaccurate comparison for at least 3 reasons, which I detail in my testimony, and again, I'll skip over for the sake of time. I want to turn finally to this question of equity in the cost recovery of CSGs. As I said at the beginning, if benefits are greater than costs, there's compatibility with the public interest. But there can still be winners and losers, and I think it's really important to analyze this. In 2023, the legislature made significant changes to the program, particularly to protect non-subscribers. And these protections are now under the purview of the PUC, and it's my understanding that legislative intent is being taken up and is providing clear guidance. And so I think it's worth separating the discussion about equity and how costs are recovered for the legacy program and for the new program. And importantly for the legacy program, I think it's important for policymakers to avoid retroactive rate making that can undercut the investments of third parties that were predicated on clear statutory guidance on payments. Such an approach taken in other jurisdictions has had deeply chilling effects on private investments. And without a robust environment for private capital to flow into clean energy projects, meeting our statutory goals for carbon reductions will likely to become more difficult. So a potential solution. To address equity in the cost of the legacy program, the legislature could consider alternative methods for making good on the commitments to paying the early movers in CSG development that are driving the large share of the so-called above market costs. One approach that other states have taken is to establish an income-exempt public benefit charge. A public benefit charge would create a revenue stream separate from the fuel clause to pay for any above market costs to the legacy program. And by exempting low-income customers from paying into the public benefit charge, this approach would align quite directly with the 2023 policy design to establish non-subscriber protections in the new program. This approach would have the effect of avoiding retroactive rate making by keeping payments to the legacy community solar program unchanged while creating a more equitable pathway to collecting the costs of the new program. So with that, I'll wrap up here and welcome to take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Shan. Thanks for your patience and thanks for moving the discussion along. The chair has a couple questions. When you talk about equity and winners and losers, you're drawing our attention to a potential distinction between the existing program and any future programs?
That's right. I think winners and losers refers to, who is bearing the cost and who's receiving the benefits.
Thank you. Members, any questions for Dr. Chan? Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I'm not sure if this is for Dr. Chan or for the Department of Commerce, but it goes back to the value of solar calculation and the fact that historically the value of the greenhouse gas emission input has been about a third of the value of solar. So at $99, which it would have been under the old calculation, would have meant about $33 of the value was due to greenhouse emission. Yet, as you mentioned, the value of solar now has jumped up to $200 per megawatt hour, about twice the rate of what we had. And if I do that calculation, and if the only change was the value associated to greenhouse gas emission, that's gone up 4 times to $134 per megawatt hour. And I guess I'm curious how that change was made, because again, I couldn't get to the link that was provided in the document. And one of the concerns I've had, Mr. Chair, with the value of solar calculation, and maybe something this commission can revisit at a future date, is that it seems somewhat arbitrary in how some of those values are generated. Love to have a deeper dive from the Department of Commerce or PUC on that. What would you have as so let's take the value of solar out of it, right? What would the cost per kilowatt hour be to a customer, unsubsidized, if in a CSG?
Thank you, Senator.
Dr.
and
Chan.
Chairs. Yeah, thank you. So to clarify, the commission approved the 2024 value of solar under the existing methodology and the existing valuation for carbon emissions. In a separate docket focused on externalities, they updated the social cost of carbon, as it's called, not based on their own analysis, but based on an interagency federal analysis of climate science, and came to this number, and that passes through. And if the commission were to revisit the value of solar in 2025, this is how it would pass through. And that's my own calculation here of $200, just moving from one docket into the value of solar docket. And so I believe your question, though, is what would it look like, or what are the costs to ratepayers for solar energy without the value of solar? Is that right?
Absent the value of solar, right? I mean, what we've got is we've got a social cost that we've calculated, but then there's a nominal cost that's actually paid by consumers.
Right. Thank you. So to my understanding is that the Community Solar Garden program is unique in that it compensates subscribers for the benefits to society. And anything, any costs of the program below that create investment opportunities to build projects that are net beneficial to society. That's different from how a utility-owned project is developed, which is a cost-plus based system where the utilities perform an exercise to find the lowest cost resources and then are compensated at the cost plus a margin on top of that. So the Community Solar Garden program is really based on benefits, not costs. Any difference between benefits and costs go to the subscribers and developers.
Thanks, Doctor. Quickly, Senator Pratt.
Quickly, yes, Mr. Chair, and maybe something for a future meeting. I think you touched on it, the value, the cost of production utility versus CSG is quite different. I know there was I saw the article in May of 2024 that had about the $100 million value that you talked about earlier, and I haven't gone through the spreadsheet, but it's something I think we need to look at. And with a 70% tax credit or subsidy from other ratepayers, the reason I had asked for what is the cost unsubsidized is trying to get some sort of apples to apples comparison that we can use across all of the different options we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Thank you, members. Thank you, Dr. Chan, again for your time. Mr. Pranis, we would really like to move this to the end of the agenda. We have other witnesses here. If I were to suggest a couple minutes would be enough time, would you complain?
No. Thank you, Chair Friends, committee members. I won't complain with whatever time I'm given. Kevin Pranis, on behalf of Lino, Minnesota, North Dakota. As you know, we represent construction laborers. I'll keep this very quick. And I think as this committee knows, our principles are high-quality jobs for local workers and economic opportunities for local communities, equitable access to affordable, reliable energy that's vital to our members, contractors, and the companies they work for, and our communities, and climate and environmental progress, including clean power and fuels, with a full technology toolbox. And to be clear, we support utility scale, community scale, and rooftop solar, as well as tools you heard about earlier, such as hydrogen. On CSGs, I just want to focus on the changes and where we stand today. First, I want to thank the legislature for the progress that we made on job quality, including prevailing wage requirements in the new generation of CSGs, as well as in the distributed generation standard. I think that's important. Today, utility scale wind and solar projects are consistently creating high quality jobs for local workers, and there's no reason we can't do the same with CSGs. That was an important step forward. We agree with the comments of the commission that cost presents a real challenge as it expands, and the fact that those costs are not evenly distributed, in that members like ours disproportionately bear those costs compared to the folks who are getting the benefits. Now, in some cases, they're public entities that, you know, we save on taxes and we pay more in rates. In other cases, they're private companies that we think don't necessarily need those same subsidies. And I think it's not rocket science why, and the national survey data shows on average community solar costs about double utility scale solar, and mostly it's a question of scale, right? And it's just cheaper to build larger projects than smaller. It doesn't mean it doesn't have a use, right? But there's some additional costs, and we need to figure out how best to manage those. And that's a challenge for climate progress. And I would point out here that value of solar is an important concept, but it's important here that, first of all, we're not talking about money back in people's pockets, but more importantly, what solar does in a planning state like Minnesota, any solar displaces mostly other solar. In other words, solar performs the same way, whether it's on a rooftop or a community solar garden or a utility scale project, which means that it's, you know, when it's producing, when the sun's shining, it's producing, and we're getting energy from it. When the sun's not shining, it's not producing. And so there's a limit to how much solar, absent other resources, you can integrate. And so when we add CSGs, that reduces the amount of utility scale solar we need. Again, not necessarily a problem. We're also challenged in developing utility scale solar. So that's why we're so excited about the distributed generation standard that the legislature put in. We think it's a chance to bring down costs and add competition and transparency and ensure our values the way that the projects developed under a regular order do. And without winners and losers, we think that'll hopefully show that community scale solar is an important resource. Our recommendations here, just continuing to monitor costs, I think is important, and move forward with both programs. We appreciate that the legislature also allowed on the traditional the new CSG program, this Department of Commerce can now look under the hood at those costs and make sure that there's greater benefits for ratepayers. And I think that was a really good reform, as well as the focus on low income. And I think the DG program will help give a better sense of the real market price of solar. And finally, we'd like to ensure that those tax credits that are mentioned, and there could be further action by the legislature to make sure that those tax credits go to ratepayers to help reimburse for those costs rather than just to developers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pranis. 157. Members, any questions for Mr. Pranis? All right, thank you again, Mr. Pranis. Members, we have 4 public testimony witnesses. These are members of the public who asked to be able to address the commission. I hope that we could make just a few more minutes. I apologize as the chair for taking a little extra. I show John Farrell, Timothy Den Herder Thomas, Drew Harper, and Sachi Graber. Why don't we have Mr. Farrell and Mr. Den Herder Thomas come to the table. We would love to get by with 90 seconds to 2 minutes per, if that's okay. And members, that is all the witnesses we have on the agenda. We will adjourn immediately following the final witness. Mr. Farrell, why don't you introduce yourself and fire away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, and members of the commission. I'm John Farrell, co-director and director of the Energy Democracy Initiative at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, and I will do my best to meet the 90-second challenge. Fortunately, Deputy Commissioner Grancy actually covered part of my testimony, which is around the idea that there are many components to the cost of utility scale solar that we don't often see, and they're not shown in the fuel cost, as she mentioned. There are a lot of ingredients to the apple pie, and I'm here to talk briefly about those ingredients. So there's really 3 parts to the cost of utility scale solar that we need to consider if we're trying to do, as we have been asked, get an apples to apples comparison. The piece that we are seeing most often reflected in the charts and information that's been shared is the generation cost. And in an analysis that ILSR performed, our range of utility scale solar costs is based on public data about Xcel's and other Midwest solar projects, and I'll just say that the high end of the range is most often accurate. I do have a handout that I'll put on the table on the way out for folks that want to grab it. It's got a link to our analysis. Another thing that needs to be included, though, is the delivery cost. When we talk about, for example, LMP prices, we're talking about at a wholesale market, a node on the system from which power has to continue to be delivered to get to ultimate customers. It's like saying what the price is for an Amazon package to go get it at the warehouse. It's got to be delivered to your door, and there's an additional cost. And we've included that in our analysis. And the final thing that's important is to include utility shareholder earnings. As was mentioned by Dr. Chan, utilities have a cost-plus basis for the way that they calculate the cost of the solar they develop, and their shareholders earn a return on those investments. So the total cost to consumers is much higher than the generation costs when we talk about utility-scale solar, and these costs don't conveniently show up on a fuel cost adjustment. They're often buried in a rate case where you mix in many of those different flavors, the generation, the transmission, and the utility earnings. So it can be very easy to be misled with some of these analyses about what the actual costs of utility scale are versus local solar. On local solar, the community solar prices are actually quite transparent because we actually have, as you've seen in many documents and heard many times, the numbers that are being revealed. But the one thing I want to highlight here is that some of the costs that you see in the value of solar are actually savings to customers, such as the avoided distribution and transmission costs. So think of it like buying an electric car. I buy an electric car and I might pay a premium to purchase the car, but I'm going to save on fuel and maintenance for the entire life of that vehicle. And as a Nissan Leaf owner over the past 5 years, I can say that I've saved several $100s on gas because I've been driving on electricity, which is significantly cheaper. So the truth is that when we account for the full cost of utility scale solar, generation, transmission, and utility earnings, and for the grid savings from community solar or rooftop solar, the actual cost per kilowatt hour that Minnesota electric customers actually pay all in on their bills is actually very similar. I will share the analysis, put it out on the table when I leave, but thank you so much for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Farrell. Next, can I assume that you are Mr. Den Herder Thomas? Mr. Den Herder Thomas, welcome to the LEC. Hoping for 90 seconds to 2 minutes. Please present your testimony.
Thank you, Co-Chair Friends, Co-Chair Acom, and members of the LEC. My name is Timothy Den Herder Thomas, and I'll do my best in the time. I'm General Manager at Cooperative Energy Futures. We're a member-owned Minnesota cooperative that's working to make the clean energy sector more equitable. We have over 1,100 members across the state. These are residents of manufactured housing parks, affordable housing, members of the Somali and Latino immigrant communities. We have folks in North Minneapolis, Mankato, St. Cloud, Faribault, all over the state. And we're part of Minnesota's long history of community-owned and controlled energy. That's a history that started with the formation of rural electric co-ops that provided electric service to Minnesota. It continued in the early 2000s with all the community-based energy development that helped farmers band together to own wind. And now it's taking the form of a cooperative ownership of community solar. Other speakers have covered here today how community solar garden program costs have been compared or misrepresented in comparison to utility costs. Whereas, as John just mentioned, there are costs hidden in the fuel clause. Others have talked about the benefits of the program. I wanted to highlight one other feature, which I think is very important, and that's the importance of choice. Our members come to us from an energy experience where they have little control and no choice. When there's natural gas price spikes, whether from like Winter Storm Uri or conflict in Ukraine or other parts of the world, those costs are passed right on to them through their utility bills. There's no protection, even though they had no real say in the usage of that sort of energy. And energy utilities are also continuously raising rates on their own. And again, these are rates that have nothing to do with the fuel clause. They're not driven by community solar or other costs like this. They are investments that the utility is seeking to make. And those increases to fund infrastructure and create shareholder profits are something that many of our members have not for a long time had any way to do anything about. Many of our members are renters or low-income households, so they can't invest in their own home, they can't put up solar, they can't do efficiency, either because they don't own their property or because they don't have the money to invest up front. Time and time again, we've heard from our members that they're really fed up with having to pay for rising energy costs over which they have no choice. The thing that they're excited about in community solar is the ability to reduce their utility bills right now, that they can lock in predictability and stability over time, and through a cooperative that they have a chance to own and share in the profits of Minnesota's energy transition, profits that were once only available to private investors or utility shareholders. Community solar is really about helping, especially now with the new program, helping vulnerable Minnesotans have the power in their energy relationship to make a different choice. The 2023 overhaul of the community solar program was a powerful step towards that future. We really thank the legislature for its vision in creating that priority for an equitable approach to community solar. And we look forward to your continued support in making that vision a reality.
Thank you, Mr. Denhardt Thomas. I just want to say to your comment about choice, that is my concern. XL ratepayers who are non-subscribers have had no choice in the extra above market cost attributed to them, and that is precisely why we're having this discussion. With that, we have Drew Harper testifying, and then Sachi Graber on deck. Perhaps Mr. Harper's online? Okay, staff tells me we do not show Harper online, so with that, is it Ms. Graber? All right, Ms. Graber. And members, this is the last witness. Welcome to the LEC. Please introduce yourself. Hopefully, a minute and a half to 2 minutes is enough. Thank you very much for your patience. Fire away.
Thank you so much, co-chairs and members. It's great to have the chance to be here today. My name is Sachiko Graber. I live in Minneapolis, and I am a member of Cooperative Energy Futures. I wanted to testify about community solar gardens today because of the importance that I see them serving in creating access to clean energy resources across our community. I don't own my home. I'm a renter, and Google tells me that almost 30% of Minnesotans are also renters. My experience has been that I have lived in 3 different buildings since I moved to Minneapolis in 2020. And to say nothing of the upfront cost component, that means I don't have control over my roof. It would not be possible for me to participate in a rooftop solar program just because of the time frame that we're talking about. We also know that younger generations tend to be renting these days, and we know that lower income Minnesotans are more likely to rent. So for these demographics and for many other Minnesotans, the financial burdens, the rental agreements, the other barriers often prevent us from being a part of the clean energy transition. No incentive to put rooftop solar on a home you don't own. I would probably get in trouble, right? If I tried to call my landlord and say, like, I want to put rooftop solar on my home because I'm not satisfied with the energy that I'm receiving from my electric company. It can be really difficult for us to invest in things like electric vehicles because we don't have control over the charging. It can be really hard to invest in solar when we don't have that stability and the ability to make that decision for ourselves. So I'm here because community solar gardens like Cooperative Energy Futures give us that access. For me, they've created an opportunity to participate in a program that saves money on my energy bill. They reduced the barriers to participation so that I wasn't in that situation of saying, I have to come up with the money to buy a house to live in for 20 years in order to be able to say that I have solar energy access. I'm really worried as a citizen about our ability to progress on clean energy as a state. And it's really important for me that we continue to have enabled community solar garden programs so that citizens like me can actually access cleaner energy. And I really thank you for all of the work you've done to create this program and to continue allowing it to flourish in Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Graber. Do members have any questions, first of all, for this witness? Okay. Anybody from the public who, for some reason, did not let us know that they wanted to testify here at 3:30? All right. With that, members, we are adjourned.